The massive chamber stretched for miles in every direction. Crystal spires reached toward a dome that showed the swirling colors of deep space. Beings from across the galaxy filled the floating platforms that circled the central stage. Some had blue skin and 6 arms. Others looked like walking trees made of metal. A few were just clouds of glowing gas that somehow spoke with voices. This was the Galactic Confederation Council. The most powerful beings in known space came here to make decisions that affected billions of worlds. Today they were all laughing. Director Sarah Chen stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the chamber. She was human, which meant she looked very plain compared to everyone else. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple style. She wore a dark blue uniform with Earth's symbol on the shoulder. In her hands she held a data tablet that contained humanity's application to join the Confederation. "Please," Sarah said into the speaking device. Her voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "If you would just listen to what humans can offer." The laughter grew louder. Admiral Kexathara, a creature that looked like a giant mantis made of purple crystal, stood up on his platform. When he spoke, his voice sounded like breaking glass. "What can your species offer?" Kexathara asked. "You still use chemical rockets to leave your planet. Your fastest ships barely reach half the speed of light. It takes you months to travel between nearby stars." More laughter filled the chamber. A being made of swirling silver mist floated closer to the center. This was Counselor Vex of the Nebula Collective. "We have been traveling faster than light for 10,000 years, Vex said in a voice like wind through caves. "Our children learned to bend space and time before they learned to walk." Sarah kept her face calm, but inside she felt angry and embarrassed. She had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. Earth had spent 50 years just learning how to build ships that could make the journey. The humans had thought this would be their greatest achievement. Instead, these alien beings treated it like a joke. "Humans have other qualities," Sarah tried again. "We are creative. We solve problems in new ways. We never give up even when things seem impossible." This brought the biggest wave of laughter yet. High Counselor Zorth, who ruled the ancient Vorthan Empire, leaned forward. Zorth looked like an enormous turtle, but his shell was covered in glowing patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. "Never give up?" Zorth's voice was deep and slow. "Child, we have been watching your species for centuries. You fight wars over pieces of dirt. You poison your own air and water. Half your people do not have enough food while the other half throws food away. You call this never giving up?" Sarah's hands tightened on her data tablet. Everything Zorth said was true. Earth still had many problems, but humans were working to fix them. They had come so far in just a few hundred years. Couldn't these ancient beings see the potential? "Every species has growing pains," Sarah said. "Humans learn from mistakes. We adapt. We find ways to survive that others never think of." "Survive?" Admiral Kexathara made a sound like breaking crystal that might have been laughter. "Your species will be extinct within 1,000 years. Maybe sooner. We have seen it happen to dozens of worlds exactly like yours." The other council members nodded or made their species' version of agreeing sounds. They had all been alive for thousands of years. Some had been around since before Earth's sun was born. To them, humanity was just another young species that would probably destroy itself before it learned to be civilized. Counselor Thale of the Mind Collective spoke next. Thale looked almost human, except for the third eye in the center of his forehead and skin that shifted colors with his thoughts. "The Confederation has standards," he said. "Members must have technology that is at least Class 7. Humans barely qualify as Class 3. They do not even have basic dimensional awareness," added Counselor Yarix, whose body was a collection of floating metal spheres. "They think reality has only 4 dimensions. How can they possibly understand advanced physics?" Sarah felt her last hope slipping away. She had one more thing to try, but it was dangerous. The people who had sent her had been very clear about what she could and could not say. She was walking right up to the line they had drawn. "Humanity may seem simple to you," she said carefully, "but we have qualities that might surprise you. We see things differently. We think about problems in ways that others do not." High Counselor Zorth made a dismissive gesture with one massive claw. "Enough, we have heard all we need to hear. The vote will proceed." The chamber filled with lights as each council member cast their vote. Red lights meant no. Green lights meant yes. Sarah watched as platform after platform lit up with red light. Not a single green light appeared. "The motion fails," Zorth announced. "Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Confederation." Furthermore, Earth is banned from submitting another application for 50 standard years. The chamber erupted in more laughter and the alien equivalent of applause. Sarah stood alone at the speaking platform, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. 50 years was more than a human lifetime. Most of the people who had worked to get her here would be dead before Earth could try again. But Sarah had one more job to do. While the aliens celebrated their decision, she quietly reached into her pocket. Her fingers found a small device no bigger than a coin. It looked like a simple communicator, the kind humans used for basic messages between ships. She pressed a tiny button on the side. The device began sending a signal that traveled faster than light, faster than any of the Confederation's technology could detect or stop. The signal went out in all directions, but it was coded in a way that only certain receivers would understand it. The message was short and simple. They said no. Begin phase 2. Sarah put the device back in her pocket and gathered her papers. As she walked toward the exit, she could still hear the aliens talking about humanity behind her. 50 years, Admiral Kexthera was saying. That is generous. Most species like theirs do not last 20 years after first contact. Should we take bets on how they will destroy themselves? Asked Counselor Vex. War? Disease? Environmental collapse? My money is on war, said another voice. They seem to enjoy killing each other. Sarah reached the exit and turned back for one last look at the chamber. All these powerful beings, with their advanced technology and ancient wisdom, had no idea what they had just done. They thought they were protecting the galaxy from a primitive, dangerous species. They had no idea that they had just signed their own death warrant. The signal Sarah had sent was already racing across the galaxy. In hidden places that no Confederation scanner had ever detected, other humans were receiving that signal. Plans that had been prepared for decades were now being put into motion. The Galactic Confederation had laughed at humanity. Soon they would learn why that had been a mistake. Sarah walked through the corridors of the massive space station, past aliens who paid no attention to the human they had just rejected. None of them noticed the small smile on her face. None of them saw the confidence in her step. They would remember this day for the rest of their very long lives, if they were lucky enough to survive what was coming. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Confederation had rejected humanity's application. The aliens had almost forgotten about the small blue world and its strange inhabitants. They had more important things to worry about now. Something was wrong in the galaxy. It started with the disappearance of the Kepler mining colony. The colony sat in the outer rim, far from any major trade routes. It was home to 3 million beings who dug rare metals from the rocky planets of a dead star system. One day, all communication stopped. When the Confederation sent ships to investigate, they found nothing. The planets were still there, but they were completely empty. No buildings, no machines, no bodies. Even the metals that had been mined from deep underground were gone. It was as if someone had taken everything and left behind only bare rock. The Confederation Council decided it must have been an accident. Maybe a mining experiment had gone wrong. Space was dangerous and colonies sometimes failed. They sent a few more patrol ships to watch the area and forgot about it. Then the Rigel system went dark. Rigel was different from the mining colony. It was a major hub with over 40 billion inhabitants spread across 7 planets. The system had defensive fleets, early warning networks, and communication arrays that reached across half the galaxy. It was impossible for Rigel to just disappear, but that is exactly what happened. Admiral Kexthera stood in the Confederation's war room, staring at a display that showed the galaxy. Where Rigel should have been, there was only a dark spot. Not just dark communication, but actually dark. The stars themselves were gone. How is this possible? He asked the technicians around him. Stars cannot simply vanish. Chief Scientist Morgal, a blob-like creature from the water worlds, rippled nervously as she spoke. Our long-range sensors show massive energy readings from that area. Whatever happened there released more power than a supernova. But the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. Counselor Thale appeared on a communication screen from his homeworld. His third eye was glowing bright red, which meant he was very worried. My people have been trying to reach Rigel through mental contact. There is nothing there. Not silence, but actual nothing. It is as if that entire region of space has been removed from reality. More reports came in every hour. The Zenith trade route had stopped all traffic because 3 more systems along the path had gone dark. The Vorthan Empire was pulling its fleets back to defend their core worlds. Even the mysterious Watchers, Beings of pure thought who had observed the galaxy for millions of years had begun to retreat to dimensions beyond normal space. High Counselor Zorth called an emergency session of the full council. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the great chamber, but this time no one was laughing. The mood was dark and fearful. "We are facing an unknown threat," Zorth announced. His ancient voice carried the weight of eons. "In my 40,000 years of life, I have never seen anything like this. Entire star systems are being consumed by forces we do not understand." The chamber filled with worried voices in dozens of languages. Some council members demanded military action. Others wanted to evacuate to other galaxies. A few suggested trying to communicate with whatever was causing the destruction. Then Councillor Yarix received an urgent message during the session. The floating metal spheres that made up his body began spinning faster as he processed the data. "The Andromedus Array has detected the source of the attacks," he announced. "They are called the Devourers. Our computers have found references to them in the oldest archives." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew about the Andromedus Array. It was the most advanced sensor network in the galaxy, built by a race that had died out before most current species had evolved. If the array had records of these Devourers, it meant the threat was older than anyone had imagined. "What do the archives say?" Admiral Kexthera asked. Yarix's spheres slowed their spinning. "The records are fragmentary. The Devourers appear every few million years. They consume everything in their path, converting matter and energy into forms we cannot understand. Then they disappear back to wherever they came from." "How were they stopped before?" Councillor Vex asked. "They were not stopped," Yarix replied. "They simply left when they had consumed enough. The archives suggest they sleep between feedings, somewhere outside normal space and time." The implications hit everyone at once. This was not an invasion that could be negotiated with or defeated in battle. It was more like a natural disaster, except the disaster was intelligent and could adapt to any defense. High Counselor Zorth leaned forward. "Show us what our fleets are facing." The chamber's central display activated, showing footage from the battle at the Helix Nebula. The Confederation's Third Fleet had tried to make a stand there, using the nebula's energy fields as a defensive barrier. The Devourers looked like living shadows that moved through space without ships. They had no fixed form, shifting between geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. When they attacked, they did not use weapons in any recognizable sense. Instead, they seemed to reach into the space around Confederation ships and twist reality itself. The watching council members saw battleships simply cease to exist, not destroyed or blown apart, but actually removed from reality, as if they had never been built. Weapons fired at the Devourers passed right through them, or were absorbed into their dark forms. Even the nebula's energy fields had no effect. "Our losses are total," Admiral Kexithera reported quietly. 17 fleets have engaged the enemy. None have survived. The Devourers are advancing toward the core systems. Panic began to spread through the chamber. If the Confederation's most powerful fleets could not even slow down the Devourers, what hope did anyone have? Councillor Thale tried to maintain calm. "We need to pool all our knowledge. Every species, every technology. There must be something we can do." "What about dimensional warfare?" suggested Councillor Vex. "The Nebula Collective has weapons that attack through folded space." "We tried that at Rigel," Yarix responded. "The Devourers exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dimensional attacks only seem to make them stronger." "Temporal weapons?" asked another voice, also ineffective. "They appear to exist outside normal time flow." The discussion went on for hours, but every suggestion led nowhere. The galaxy's greatest minds were stumped by an enemy that operated by rules they did not understand. Finally, a junior aide approached High Counselor Zorth with a data tablet. Zorth read it quickly, then looked up with an expression of desperate hope. "There is one possibility," he announced. "Some of our analysts suggest reaching out to primitive species. Sometimes less advanced civilizations think of solutions that we overlook." The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members thought it was worth trying anything. Others said primitive species would only get in the way. Admiral Kexithera raised one crystal claw for silence. "Which primitive species are we talking about?" The aide checked his tablet again. The analysts mentioned several candidates. The Klendari from Sector 7, the Thaxians near the Outer Rim, and... He paused, looking uncomfortable. "And what?" Zorth demanded. And the humans from Earth. The chamber fell silent again. Then slowly the laughter began. It was not the confident laughter from 6 months ago, but the bitter laughter of beings who had run out of options. The humans. Counselor Vex's voice was filled with disbelief. The ones who still use chemical rockets? What could they possibly do against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations millions of years older than theirs? It is ridiculous, agreed Admiral Kexthera. They barely qualify as spacefaring. They know nothing about dimensional physics or temporal manipulation. But even as the council members laughed, some of them were thinking. The Devourers had defeated every advanced technology thrown at them. Maybe, just maybe, a primitive approach might work where sophistication had failed. The debate continued, but it was mostly for show. Everyone knew they were grasping at straws. The Devourers were still advancing, consuming system after system. Soon they would reach the core worlds where trillions of beings lived. What no one in that chamber knew was that 3 sectors away, something was stirring in the deep space between stars. Reality was beginning to ripple and bend around a point that seemed empty to every scanner in the galaxy. The humans had received Sarah Chen's signal months ago. Now finally they were ready to respond. The signal from Director Sarah Chen traveled across space faster than light, but its destination was not another planet or space station. Instead, it reached a place that should not have existed, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a trench so dark that no sunlight had ever touched it. Something that looked like a research facility waited in the crushing depths, but the facility was not built on the ocean floor. It hung in a pocket of twisted space, existing in the same location as the water but somehow not touching it. Dr. Marcus Webb received the signal at his desk in the facility's command center. Webb looked like any human scientist with gray hair and tired eyes from years of research. But the work he did would have seemed like magic to most people on Earth's surface. Webb pressed a button on his desk. Attention all staff. We have received the Phase 2 authorization. Initiate emergency protocols. Contact all collective sites worldwide. The facility came alive with activity. Scientists and technicians moved through corridors that should not have fit in the small space but somehow did. The laws of physics work differently here, bent by technologies that the surface world did not know existed. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at Webb's office within minutes. She was younger than Webb, with dark hair and intense green eyes. Like Webb, she looked ordinary, but Elena could do things with her mind that most humans would consider impossible. How long do we have? Elena asked. Webb showed her the data streaming in from their hidden observation posts throughout the galaxy. The Devourers are moving faster than we expected. Maybe weeks before they reach the core systems. Maybe less, Elena nodded grimly. She had been preparing for this moment her entire adult life. They all had, but knowing it was coming did not make it easier. Is Terra Incognita ready? She asked, as ready as it can be. Captain Martinez and her crew finished the final calibrations yesterday. The question is whether our people can handle what we're asking them to do. Elena walked to the window that looked out into the deep ocean. Fish swam past, unaware that humans were watching them from inside a folded piece of spacetime. She had been born in a place like this, raised in facilities that existed between dimensions. To her, bending reality with thought was as natural as breathing, but Elena was one of the rare ones. Fewer than 1 human in 10 million had the genetic markers that allowed them to perceive beyond the normal 4 dimensions. Of those, only a fraction could actually manipulate what they perceived. The collective had been searching for such people for over 2 centuries. Tell me the story again, Elena said. It was a ritual between them, a way of remembering why they did this work. Webb leaned back in his chair. It started in 1822 when we first detected artificial signals from space. The surface governments thought they were just strange radio bursts. But a few scientists noticed patterns that suggested intelligence. Elena had heard this story countless times, but it never got old. It was the origin story of everything they had built. Dr. Sarah Morrison was the first to realize that the signals were not just communication. Webb continued. They were actually test patterns, probes sent by alien civilizations to measure our technological development. Earth was being studied. And Morrison decided to study back, Elena added. Exactly. She formed the first collective cell in London. Just 5 people working in secret, trying to understand what was out there. They realized that if aliens existed, humanity needed to be ready for contact. Webb stood up and walked to a wall covered with photographs. They showed the collective's history over 2 centuries. Underground laboratories, hidden research stations, and people who had dedicated their lives to preparing humanity for its place in the galaxy. The breakthrough came in 1891, Webb said, pointing to a photograph of a woman with wild hair and intense eyes. Dr. Catherine York discovered that certain human brains could perceive dimensional layers beyond normal spacetime. She was the first to map what we now call the 7th dimension. Elena smiled. Dr. York was her hero, the woman who had proven that consciousness itself could be a tool for exploring reality. York had spent her life training her mind to see beyond the physical world, documenting dimensions where thought became reality. The early experiments were dangerous, Webb continued. 43 researchers died trying to navigate dimensional space with just their minds. But each failure taught us more about how human consciousness interacted with the structure of reality. Until Dr. Hassan figured out how to build anchor points, Elena said. Right. In 1923, Dr. Yuki Hassan developed the first dimensional stabilizers, devices that could hold open doorways between dimension layers. That was when we really began to understand what we were dealing with. The wall displayed technical diagrams that would have baffled the greatest scientists on Earth's surface. Dimensional mathematics, consciousness amplification systems, and reality manipulation engines. Technologies developed in absolute secrecy by people the world had never heard of. Webb moved to another section of photos. By 1950, we had established hidden facilities on every continent, always in places where spacetime was naturally unstable. Deep ocean trenches, underground caverns, orbital debris fields, places where we could fold reality without being detected. Elena looked at images of the early dimensional explorers, men and women who had trained their minds to navigate spaces that existed between seconds, in the gaps between thoughts. Many had gone insane trying to comprehend realities beyond human understanding, but a few had succeeded, and they had passed their knowledge to others. The real breakthrough came in 1987, Webb said, pointing to a photograph of a massive underground chamber, the first successful dimensional engine, a device that could convert human thought patterns into actual changes in spacetime. And then we realized what we were really preparing for, Elena added quietly. Webb nodded. The ancient myths started making sense. Stories about creatures that devoured worlds, that came from the spaces between stars. Every human culture had some version of the same legend. We realized these were not myths but memories, passed down through genetic encoding and collective unconscious. Elena had studied those myths extensively: dragons that ate light, demons that lived in the void between thoughts, gods that consumed entire realities. All of them matched what the collective's dimensional explorers had discovered about the devourers. The aliens never learned to weaponize consciousness, Webb said. They built amazing technologies, but they always stayed within the bounds of physical laws. Humans are different. We can think our way beyond the rules of reality. Elena walked back to Webb's desk and picked up a small device that looked like a simple crystal, but when she held it, the crystal began to glow, responding to her thoughts. With concentration, she could make the device levitate, change its shape, or even make it exist in multiple places at once. Terra Incognita represents everything we have learned, she said. 200 years of research and preparation. But Elena, are we really ready? Webb was honest. I do not know. We have tested the systems, trained the crew, and prepared for every scenario we can imagine. But we are about to face beings that operate on principles beyond our understanding. Even with all our preparations, this could be humanity's last act. Elena set down the crystal and looked at the data screens showing the devourers advance through the galaxy. Entire civilizations were being consumed, beings with technologies millions of years more advanced than anything on Earth's surface. And yet, those same civilizations had never learned what the collective had spent centuries discovering. There is one thing the aliens never understood about humans, Elena said. We do not just adapt to reality. We refuse to accept it. When the universe tells us something is impossible, we find a way to make it possible anyway. Webb smiled. It was the first time Elena had seen him smile in months. Then we had better get started. Captain Martinez and her crew are waiting. Elena nodded and headed for the door. As she walked through the facility's corridors, she passed laboratories where researchers worked with devices that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. She saw training rooms where people learned to navigate reality with their minds alone, Everything the collective had built was about to be tested in the ultimate trial. At the facility's center, a doorway opened onto what appeared to be empty space. But Elena could see beyond the apparent emptiness into dimensions where terra incognita waited. The ship existed in a place where thought became reality, where human consciousness could reshape the fundamental forces of the universe. It was time to show the galaxy what humans could really do. The space around Nexus Prime, capital world of the Galactic Confederation, had become a graveyard of metal and dreams. Wrecked ships from a dozen different species drifted in the void, their hulls torn open by forces that defied understanding. The massive defense platforms that had once protected the system were now twisted sculptures of melted metal and shattered crystal. High Counselor Zorth stood in the emergency command center deep beneath Nexus Prime's surface. His ancient shell was dulled with exhaustion and despair. Around him, the last surviving members of the Confederation Council watched helplessly as their civilization died. "The 7th Fleet is gone," Admiral Kexathera reported, his crystal exoskeleton crackling with stress fractures. "The Devourers consumed them in less than 6 minutes. They are now 3 hours away from Nexus Prime." "What about the evacuation ships?" asked Counselor Vex, her gaseous form flickering with anxiety. 17% have escaped to deep space. The rest— Kexathera did not finish the sentence. Everyone knew what had happened to the rest. Zorth closed his eyes. In 40,000 years of life, he had seen civilizations rise and fall, but never like this. The Devourers did not just destroy, they erased. Worlds they touched did not become ruins, they simply stopped existing, as if they had never been created at all. "Sir," a technician called out, "we are detecting massive spatial distortions in Sector 7. Something is happening to space-time itself." On the main display, sensors showed reality beginning to bend and twist in a region of supposedly empty space. Energy readings spiked beyond anything in the Confederation's databases. Colors that had no names in any language began to bleed through the fabric of normal space. "Is it more Devourers?" Counselor Thale asked, his third eye blazing with fear. "No, sir. The energy signature is completely different. It is almost like—" The technician paused, checking his readings again, like space-time is being folded from the inside out. Then the tear appeared. Reality split open like fabric being cut with a knife. Through the gap, the beings in the command center could see impossible geometries and colors that made their minds hurt. The tear widened and something began to emerge. From the space between dimensions, terra incognita came into normal space like a dream becoming real. The ship defied every law of physics and engineering that the Confederation knew. Its hull seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed like water, but held the strength of diamond. Sections of the vessel existed in multiple dimensions at once, creating optical illusions that strained the eyes of anyone who looked at it directly. The ship's size was impossible to determine because it seemed to change depending on the angle of view. From one direction it looked small, like a fighter craft. From another it appeared massive, larger than a moon. Weapon systems were not mounted on its surface because they did not need to be. They projected directly from folded space, bypassing the normal rules of how energy and matter interacted. "What in the void is that thing?" Admiral Kexthara whispered. Before anyone could answer, the sensors detected incoming Devourers. 3 of the massive shadow beings materialized at the edge of the system, their dark forms twisting space around them. They had been following the fleeing evacuation ships, hunting down the last survivors of the Confederation. The watching council members expected the strange new ship to flee. Every other vessel that had encountered the Devourers had either run or been destroyed. But terra incognita did something different. It attacked. The ship's weapons were unlike anything in the Confederation's experience. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, terra incognita fired what could only be described as crystallized thought. Focused intention made real, given form and substance, and launched across dimensional barriers. The first Devourer took a direct hit and simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely motionless, as if time itself had frozen around it. The second Devourer tried to phase into its higher dimensional refuge, but terra incognita anticipated the move and fired into the space the creature would occupy before it got there. The third Devourer attempted to use its reality warping abilities to remove terra incognita from existence, but the human ship did something impossible. It existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, and when the Devourer tried to erase it from one dimension, The ship simply continued to exist in the other 6. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on Terra Incognita's bridge, her hands resting on control surfaces that responded to thought rather than touch. Around her, the ship's crew of 144 specially trained humans worked in perfect harmony, their minds linked through dimensional space. "Target the second entity," Elena said quietly. Her words were carried not through the ship's communication system, but directly through the 7th dimension to every crew member's consciousness. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the weapons officer, was a former artist who had learned to paint with reality itself. She visualized the Devourer's destruction, imagining it in perfect detail, and the ship's weapons systems converted her thoughts into actual force. The second Devourer began to come apart at a fundamental level. Its dark form unraveled like a piece of cloth being pulled apart by invisible hands. But this was not normal destruction. The creature was being unmade across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, erased from reality so completely that it would never have existed at all. Commander James Park handled navigation by thinking the ship from place to place. He had trained for years to understand how consciousness could fold spacetime, allowing Terra Incognita to be in multiple locations at once or to travel faster than light by stepping outside normal space entirely. The third Devourer, seeing its companions being destroyed by impossible means, tried to retreat, but Elena had anticipated this as well. "Block its escape routes," she ordered. The crew worked together to create what they called a thought cage, a structure made of crystallized intention that existed in all 7 dimensions at once. The Devourer found itself trapped in a prison made of human willpower, unable to phase into its refuge dimensions because the humans had gotten there first. In the command center on Nexus Prime, the watching aliens could barely believe what they were seeing. The mysterious ship was not just fighting the Devourers, it was winning. And it was doing so using principles that violated everything they thought they knew about the universe. "How is this possible?" Counselor Yarix asked, his metal spheres spinning frantically as he tried to process the data. "Nothing can defeat the Devourers. We have lost 17 fleets trying." High Counselor Zorth leaned forward, studying the strange ship more carefully. Something about its design was familiar, though he could not place what. "Run a deep scan," he ordered. "I want to know everything about that vessel. Hull composition, energy signatures, everything." The results came back within minutes, and they made no sense at all. "Sir," the technician reported, "the ship appears to be constructed using materials that do not exist in normal spacetime. Its power source reads as human consciousness? That is impossible," Admiral Kexathera said. "Furthermore," the technician continued, "we are detecting life signs aboard the vessel. The crew appears to be human." The command center fell silent. Every being present turned to stare at the display showing Terra Incognita as it finished destroying the third Devourer. The creature that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years was being systematically dismantled by a ship crewed by the primitive species they had rejected just 6 months earlier. "Humans," Counselor Vex whispered. "But how? They barely have faster-than-light travel. They know nothing about dimensional physics." On the display, Terra Incognita turned toward Nexus Prime. For a moment, the watching aliens feared they had simply traded one destroyer for another, but instead of attacking, the human ship opened a communication channel. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on the main screen. She looked exactly like what she was, a human woman in her 30s with dark hair and tired eyes. But there was something different about those eyes, something that suggested she could see beyond normal reality. "This is Captain Vasquez of the human vessel Terra Incognita," she said, in perfectly clear galactic standard. "We are here to help." High Counselor Zorth found his voice after a long moment. "Help? But you are humans. Your species was rejected from the Confederation. You lack the technology to even understand what you're facing." Elena smiled, and for a moment her image seemed to flicker, as if she existed in multiple dimensions at once. "Counselor, I think you will find that humanity has a few surprises. We have been preparing for this fight longer than you know." "Preparing? How could you have known about the Devourers?" "Because, Counselor, this is not the first time they have awakened. And this time, humanity is ready." The communication ended, leaving the alien leaders staring at a blank screen. Around them, their instruments showed something impossible. The human ship had somehow defeated beings that had destroyed civilizations millions of years older and more advanced than Earth. And if the humans were right, If they had really been preparing for this fight, then perhaps the galaxy was not doomed after all. Perhaps the species they had laughed at was about to save them all. The battle for the galaxy's survival was about to begin in earnest. In the depths of space near the galactic core, something stirred that had slept for 3 million years. The Devourer Prime, the first and most powerful of its kind, had sensed the destruction of its offspring. Captain Elena Vasquez felt its awakening like a cold wind blowing through her mind. She stood on Terra Incognita's bridge, watching as space itself began to darken around the galactic core. Stars were going out, not destroyed but simply ceasing to exist as the Prime's influence spread. "All crew, prepare for dimensional transition," Elena announced. Her words traveled through the 7th dimension to every mind on the ship. "We are going to face the source." Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on the bridge's communication screen from his deep-sea facility on Earth. His face was grave. "Elena, the readings we are getting from the Prime are beyond anything we prepared for. It is not just larger than the others. It exists across more dimensional layers than we thought possible." "How many layers?" Elena asked. "At least 12. Maybe more. It has been alive since before this galaxy formed. It has had millions of years to grow and learn." Elena nodded. She had expected this. The collective's ancient record suggested that the Devourer Prime was not just the first of its kind, but the template from which all others had been created. Destroying it would not be like the smaller battles they had won. "What about the weapon modifications?" she asked. "Complete," Webb replied. "But Elena, you understand what using them will mean?" She did understand. The modifications would allow Terra Incognita to strike at the Prime across all dimensional layers simultaneously, but doing so would require the crew to extend their consciousness so far beyond normal human limits that they would not be able to return. The ship itself would become trapped between dimensions, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. "The crew has voted," Elena said simply. We all knew this might be the price. Around the bridge, her 143 fellow crew members worked at their stations with calm determination. Each of them had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was likely a one-way journey. They were artists and philosophers, scientists and warriors, all united by their ability to think beyond the boundaries of normal reality. Lieutenant Sarah Kim looked up from her weapons console. "Captain, we have visual contact with the Prime. The main display activated, showing something that should not have been possible to see." The Devourer Prime was so vast that it bent light around itself, creating a sphere of absolute darkness larger than most solar systems. But Terra Incognita's dimensional sensors could perceive what normal eyes could not. The Prime was beautiful in its horror. It existed as a constantly shifting pattern of geometric forms that hurt to look at directly. Parts of it seemed to be made of crystallized time, while other sections appeared to be built from the dreams of dead civilizations. It moved through space not by traveling but by convincing reality that it had always been where it wanted to go. "Distance to target?" Elena asked. 12 million kilometers and closing, reported Commander James Park from the navigation station. "The Prime it is not moving toward us. It is bringing space to itself." Elena understood. At this level of power, the Devourer Prime did not need to travel. It simply redefined what space was, folding the universe so that everything came to it eventually. Fighting such a being required thinking on scales that most minds could not grasp. "All hands, initiate consciousness link," Elena ordered. Across the ship, 144 human minds joined together through the 7th dimension. Elena felt her awareness expand as her crew's thoughts merged with her own. Sarah's artistic vision, James's mathematical precision, Dr. Rodriguez's philosophical insights, Lieutenant Chen's warrior's courage, all became part of a single, vast intelligence that operated across multiple layers of reality. The Devourer Prime noticed their approach and turned its attention toward them. The effect was like standing in front of a black hole made of pure hunger. Elena felt the creature probing their defenses, trying to understand what these strange beings were and how they could exist in so many dimensions at once. Then the Prime spoke. Not in words, but in concepts that bypassed language entirely and went straight to the mind. "What are you?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. The Prime's voice carried the weight of eons, the accumulated hunger of countless devoured worlds. But Elena and her crew held firm, their joined consciousness strong enough to withstand the mental assault. We are human, Elena replied, projecting the thought across all dimensional layers. We are the species you never encountered before. Impossible. I have consumed every form of life in this galaxy, twice. Not us, we were not ready before, now we are. The Prime's attention focused more intensely on Terra Incognita. Elena could feel it analyzing every aspect of their ship and crew, trying to understand how beings so young could operate on dimensional levels that most species never even discovered. You think with your entire being, the Prime realized. Not just your minds, but your souls, your dreams, your stubborn refusal to accept limits. Fascinating. Elena felt the creature's interest, and it terrified her more than its hunger had. The Prime was not just a destroyer. It was a student, always learning from what it consumed. And now it wanted to learn from humanity. I will enjoy adding your knowledge to mine, the Prime continued. Your species will make me stronger than I have ever been. Now, Elena whispered to her crew. Terra Incognita's weapon systems activated, but not in any way the Galactic Confederation would have recognized. The ship did not fire energy or projectiles. Instead, it fired pure human willpower. Concentrated stubbornness made manifest across 12 dimensions simultaneously. The attack struck the Devourer Prime and actually staggered it. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient creature felt something it had almost forgotten. Surprise. How? Because, Elena said aloud, knowing the Prime could hear her across dimensional space. Humans do not just fight with our bodies or our machines. We fight with our refusal to give up. We fight with our ability to imagine things that should be impossible, and then make them real anyway. The battle that followed took place across multiple layers of reality at the same time. Elena and her crew fought not just with weapons, but with the full force of human creativity and determination. Sarah painted new realities into existence, using her artist's vision to create pockets of space where the Prime's power could not reach. James navigated through mathematical impossibilities, taking the ship to places that existed only in theoretical equations. Dr. Rodriguez, the ship's philosopher, engaged the Prime in a battle of concepts, using logic and paradox to tie up portions of the creature's vast intelligence. Lieutenant Chen and the other warriors projected their fighting spirit into dimensional space, creating barriers made of pure human courage. But the Prime was learning. With each attack, it adapted, finding new ways to counter their strategies. Elena realized they were not going to win through conventional fighting. They needed something more desperate. Initiate the Omega Protocol, she ordered. Her crew understood immediately. The Omega Protocol was their last resort, a tactic so dangerous that using it would trap them all between dimensions forever. But it was the only way to ensure the Prime could never threaten the galaxy again. One by one, the crew members began to extend their consciousness beyond safe limits. They pushed their awareness into dimensional layers that no human mind was meant to perceive, accepting the knowledge that they would never be able to return. Elena felt her sense of self beginning to dissolve as her consciousness spread across 7 dimensions at once. She was still Elena Vasquez, but she was also becoming something more, something that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the gaps between seconds. The ship itself began to change, its hull becoming more and more translucent as it shifted into higher dimensional space. Terra Incognita was becoming a prison made of crystallized human determination, designed to hold the Devourer Prime in a place where it could never escape. No, the Prime realized what was happening. You cannot. I am eternal. I am inevitable. Nothing is inevitable, Elena replied, her voice now speaking from everywhere and nowhere at once. Humans proved that when we first looked at the stars and decided to reach them. We proved it when we chose to fight you instead of running, and we prove it now. The dimensional prison closed around the Devourer Prime like a cage made of crystallized willpower. The creature found itself trapped in a space that existed in all dimensions simultaneously, held there by the combined determination of 144 humans who had chosen to sacrifice everything to protect the galaxy. Elena felt herself fading from normal reality, her consciousness spreading so thin across dimensional space that she was becoming more concept than person. But she held on long enough to send one final message to the Galactic Confederation. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Terra Incognita. The Devourer Prime has been contained. It cannot escape the dimensional prison we have created. But our crew, we cannot return. Tell the galaxy that humanity fought not because we had to, but because it was right. The message reached Nexus Prime, where the surviving members of the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as Terra Incognita and its crew faded from normal space-time. The humans had won, but at the ultimate cost.